So today I'm joined by Becks Powell, Marketing Programs Manager UK and Nordics at Showpad. Becks, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
So Becks, I'm literally really happy, delighted to be able to pick up our conversation where we left off several months ago, actually. Previously, you were heading up ABM over at Unit 4, and we had an initial conversation, and we were about to record, but unfortunately, then you obviously moved on, so we never got to share that amazing program that you were running there at Unit 4. So obviously it was quite a formidable program, actually. So what can we expect from you with your new role at Showpad?
Yeah, of course. So unlike what I was doing at Unit 4, I have a much more regional focus. So rather than focusing on the one-to-many, it's very much focused on our top accounts, which is one-to-one, and also looking at some one-to-few activities. And actually being in region, it means that we're able to do regional events, which are included in part of our ABM strategy. So we're kind of doing everything from running very bespoke digital campaigns right through to very targeted roundtables, which we're inviting our top accounts to. So a much more, I would say, narrow focus on the accounts that we're targeting. So going from Unit 4, where we're targeting around 6,000 accounts, we're now focused on the sort of top 20 accounts here at Showpad. I think Showpad in their ABM journey are a bit more mature in terms of how they want to approach ABM and the resources that they're putting into it. And we've actually got very good executive buy-in to ABM as well, which really does help with those types of programs.
Absolutely. I mean, the C-suite buying is absolutely crucial to get that kind of the ABM to kind of move out across the company, go wide, go deep. So obviously Showpad, it's quite a well-known brand. I mean, I've been following you as a company for about 2 or 3 years now, and obviously you're doing some fantastic marketing. How are you going to use Showpad, the actual technology Showpad itself? How are you going to use that in your ABM program?
Yeah, so it's a great question. So Showpad is all about creating very highly personalized experiences for our buyers. So we want to make sure the people that we're selling to, that their customers have great experiences. And we also use that functionality as well. So we use everything from so we have Showpad content where we can collate content for our sales team to be able to use for their target accounts, but you can also heavily personalize that content within the platform as well. And we've got Showpad Coach as well, where we can actually train sales teams. So we have very good sales training. So say if we get an account exec in the UK and they need to get up to speed, we can do that very quickly through the platform. And then a really new exciting feature, which is fantastic for ABM, is that we've just introduced Showpad Video. So we can now actually create very engaging experiences using that. We can do mini demos that we can fire off. We can do very personalized touch points that you just can't do sometimes through email and all those types of communications. So yes, we'll be using it, and we are using it quite heavily in what we do.
You've got obviously the whole suite of Showpad you're actually able to roll out into your ABM program, and obviously with the video being the most recent feature in addition to that. But let's talk about, because obviously when we were talking before about this interview and some of the focus moving from where you were running a kind of an ABM at scale program at Unit 4 now to a much more kind of boutique, more focused, targeted campaign at Showpad. What's the main learning that you take moving from one ABM role and one ABM program in one company? What's the kind of main learning you take moving from one to another?
Yes, so the absolute key learning, especially going into a more targeted approach, is doing the research. We have done some ABM campaigns previously where that account insight and research wasn't done up front. So what's ended up going out was quite generic and wasn't hitting the right people, and they weren't engaging with the content. Whereas we've completely changed our approach, where we're using a third party to help with that research and insight piece, because without that, it's the absolute foundations, I personally think, of ABM, is having that account research and insights in place, because from there you're able to build your messaging, you can build a creative hook, and then you can work out what plays you can go to market with, because within that account you may have the sort of C-suite sales and marketing, for example, but they all need to be targeted completely differently. And so I think absolutely doing that research is integral to everything that we do.
So let's, Bex, let's dig a bit deeper into the ABM plans rather that you have at Showpad. I understand that your focus in the first instance is going to be an ABM program looking at your prospects as opposed to your customers. It'd be great if you could share with the audience how to get started with ABM. If that sounds like a good thing to dig into. So let's what made you choose between prospects versus existing customers? Because obviously ABM, originally in its essence, in its early days, it was primarily focused on existing customers rather than new logo acquisition. So what's your thinking about going using it for prospects in the first instance?
Yes, so what our sales team and BDRs are really good at Showpad is landing and then expanding an account. So we wanted to focus on our prospects to see, so we're focusing on prospects which have a higher sort of lifetime value, so that we can really land those, but then we can nurture them carefully into all the different solutions that we do offer, so that we can grow that account over time. Rather than looking at our existing customers, because we do have programs where we kind of nurture those and help them grow. So it was a key focus to try and drive our pipeline and really land some accounts to enable our sales team to really grow their pipelines.
So if we talk about the prospects that you're going to be going after with your ABM program there, Bex, how do you go about selecting which accounts to actually target from your prospect list?
Yes, absolutely. So the first thing we did, so I aligned with our BDR manager in the UK, and then what we did is pulled a list from Salesforce to look at who are our prospects within our IPC. So we looked at we've got what's called our IPC Plus and our IPC Mature. So we know that we can go to market very well with those IPCs. So we picked those, and then we looked at tier A accounts that have shown that have shown a 6 cents intent over a certain amount. So they were sort of plus 60, if you know 6 cents modules quite well. And then what we did is we looked at that list and we worked out which industries are showing the most intent, or which have the sort of longer lifetime values that we could go after. And we identified 2 industries, which were manufacturing and technology. And then within those, what we did is we looked at all of the accounts with the account executives and got their insights and intel as to who do you think would be the top accounts within these, but also using the data and insights that we have from our MarTech to see what their engagement's like, what sort of intent they've had, have they engaged with us in the past, for example, as well. And we used all of that information to then we've picked 4 accounts per AE within our region. So we've got 5 account execs and they've got 4 accounts each. So we wanted to make it fair across our account execs as well, to make sure that we're trialing the program with each one of those, to also see who adopts it well, who adopts the ABM model well for future programs.
And so if we dig into that a bit more about the account selection, because you've touched on their
Yeah.
sixth sense and their intent data platform. You've touched on working with your sales team very closely and your AEs. So let's just dig into that a bit more. Sixth sense, for the audience out there that perhaps maybe familiar with the name but not familiar with the technology, how do you go about using the platform to look for intent to help you guide choosing X company over Y company?
Yes, absolutely. So it's based on either keywords or topics that we've entered into the platform, and also a bit of competitor analysis. And then Sixth Sense also picks on, have they engaged in the ecosystem around these particular topics or areas. So, for example, if they've visited a webinar or engage with a certain piece that's around sales enablement, we'll know that they're in that market or starting to research those particular pieces that we want to target them with. And then that starts to show in a platform, and it's segmented through, so we have awareness, consideration, decision and purchase. So we're able to see what accounts fit under what buckets. And then we actually target them separately. We've bundled awareness and consideration together, and then decision and purchase. So we have awareness and conversion campaigns for each of those different models. But it's such a useful way of us being able to say, okay, we've got these accounts, they're showing intent, but it also helps inform the messaging that we're going to that account with. So if account X, for example, is saying, I'm interested in sales enablement content or how I can use video, we can actually target them with video and our content offering. Or if they're interested in coach, we can target them with that. So it really helps us target those accounts in the right way and make sure that we're being very relevant and not wasting their time bombarding them with every single offering that we have.
So it's kind of relevance, context, and timing really to get the message to land into the right account at the right time with the right message.
Yes, absolutely.
And you mentioned there about messaging and messaging framework. How do you go about then building those messaging frameworks? So you've worked out using Sixth Sense, talking to your AEs and your sales teams, that you have the right accounts. You do some tiering, I imagine, and you do some kind of prioritization. You then have your account list, as you've mentioned, but per industry. How would you then go about building some messaging framework for those accounts?
Yes. So we at this point of time are working with an agency on that framework, but where I've done it previously is we would either work with our internal product marketing team or our content team, and we would do interviews with each of the AEs to see if there's any sort of golden nuggets that we're not able to find from sort of desktop research within those accounts. And then we'd also look at the intent around the accounts. We'd look at what content we already have that we could maybe utilize and repurpose. But then we would start to build out a messaging framework based on what industry they're in, what persona they're on, what the key value drivers are as well, and kind of craft something that way. But it's absolutely all in the research that informs those messaging frameworks, because you might decide you may not want to split your plays by manufacturing and technology. You might want to do it by business challenges, for example. So it's just really trying to understand what those key drivers are for your customers.
And Bex, when you talk about prospect plays, is this kind of, do you go to the degree of kind of documenting this, and that the sales team have literally a playbook that they can rely on and use? Is that the extent you go to?
Yes, we're actually working on this right now, so it's nice and fresh in my mind, which is great. But what we're doing is we are developing a BDR playbook for our business development reps all around our ABM strategy as well. And it goes down even to the point where once the AE has or the AE or the BDR has engaged, we've started to split it out into stages as well. So if we have commitment and as a live project, we'll target them very differently as to if there's absolutely no response or no interest in Showpad. So what we're doing at the moment is working out and mapping out what those different plays would look like. So, for example, do we do competitor displacement campaigns? Do we up our ABM spend? Do we move accounts in between tiers? So we're sort of working that out at the moment as well.
So it's work in progress, but it's something that's going to be going live relatively soon, I imagine, from the way that you're talking about it.
It has to be live by next year.
Well, I better not detain you too much today, then. Otherwise you won't make it in time. So let's talk about, because obviously Showpad is a MarTech solution that many people are familiar with. Obviously, in when you were running the ABM program at Unit 4, you built a pretty formidable tech stack to be able to deliver an ABM program to 6,000 accountants at the same time, and obviously with a degree of personalization. There's a lot of talk about technology and ABM. What's your take?
Oh, that's a good question. I'm a really strong believer in MarTech, using it for ABM, but I would say the one thing is you have to have the people and the resource who know how to use it properly. And that could be, hiring an ABMer or a MarTech person internally, or actually using an agency who really understands how the tools work and how to orchestrate everything. I think that's absolutely fundamental. I also think there is so much MarTech out there at the moment, it can be quite overwhelming to know which solutions to use. So it's just making sure that when you're looking at those different MarTech, that it's going to work for your company, or doing some trials with different solutions to see if they work for you and your business. But I would try and build a tech stack where you can really automate a lot of your ABM plays and make everything always on and dynamic.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because there's different schools of thought out there, aren't there, really, in terms of whether you go down the kind of the more automated, or the more personalized route, or whether there's a kind of a halfway house in the middle, really. And obviously it depends clearly if you're running a programmatic one-to-many or a one-to-few, or a much more curated, highly personalized one-to-one program where there's less technology and more hand creation, so to speak. I think when we were talking before, Becks, you mentioned that you were in the kind of the early stages of building out an ABM Centre of Excellence. Can you share with us, what does a good ABM Centre of Excellence look like?
Yes, that's a great question. I think it must have a head of ABM or a kind of head of field marketing in the centre of that, and then all around it needs to be supported by the business. So you must have executive buy-in. I would say that's really important, because it gets the whole business on the same page of doing ABM and executing ABM. And then I think, around it, you have people like myself who work in field marketing, and how do we drive ABM within our regions? How can we take what's done on a global level and execute it? Because it's going to be very different for every region how we approach our accounts. And then it's absolutely having the sales, and I think the business development representatives aligned into that ABM Centre of Excellence, because we really need them to help us execute all the different plays that we're doing. But another part of it as well, I think it should also include our customer success managers. So when they're on the front line speaking to customers and getting that feedback as well of how are we marketing to our customers? What sort of plays do they like to see? What do they absolutely hate? All of that feedback's really important so that we can make sure we get our tactics and content right moving forwards. But it takes an awful lot of work to build this out. And luckily at Showpad, everything's coming from the top. So we're able to build those foundations quite easily.
Well, it sounds like you've got quite a formidable centre of excellence coming together there. And I think from speaking to other Let's Talk ABM guests as well, I think that a lot of them see it as being the ABM team rather are kind of almost like the guardians of ABM, and the centre of excellence is a way for them to be able to extend the ABM mindset out and beyond the ABM team into the wider marketing team, into the wider sales team, and indeed into the wider company. And I think having a centre of excellence at the heart is a great way to go about things, really. Just a couple of final questions, actually, Bex. Now, let's just talk about, we often talk about the building blocks of an ABM program, whether it's ICP, whether it's account selection, the value proposition, the ABM account experience, etc. Where would you say that you spend the majority of your time? Which building block takes up a lot of your time?
Yeah, it's another good question. I think most of the time is spent in the developing what accounts we're going to target and then the research on those accounts. And I think it's so important to get that right, and that's why it takes quite a bit of time. And it's also developing what messages we're going to put into those accounts. I think that's where we spend quite a lot of our time at the moment, and making sure that we're mapping the right content to those accounts based on what message we want to send out to those. But I think once you get that right, you can execute quite quickly from there.
So it's the account selection, the insights into those accounts, particularly at the one to few and one to many and one to one rather level,
Yeah.
and then obviously then the content and the messaging that you want to run into those accounts.
Yes, absolutely.
And here's a question for you then, Bex. What do you consider to be the hardest part of ABM?
Oh, wow. I think the hardest part of ABM is making sure that you have the bandwidth to be very customer centric on the accounts that you're targeting, and actually making sure that you know your top 20 accounts inside out and what's going on with those, and not dropping the ball on them. I think that is probably the hardest part, is just keeping up that momentum in every account, making sure you're aligning with sales to make sure that we're targeting them in the right way.
So in effect, keeping up to date about everything that's going on, because obviously the work that you do at the beginning is almost like a photograph, right? And then how do you keep that photograph up to date as that account goes live into your ABM program, and how you keep that relationship and that data exchange with your sales guys? Would that be fair?
Yes, absolutely, because also the sales team are very busy on all their other accounts that they're working as well. So it's just making sure to keep up that momentum with the ABM activity that you spent so long rolling out. Just making sure that you've always got your finger on the pulse with those accounts.
Yeah, and the very, very last question, Bex. It's Friday evening, you get a call from a colleague who's a B2B marketer, and they say, hey, Bex, I need to launch an ABM program. And you say, well, I'm about to leave the office now, whatever, but you give them some of your time. What's that one piece of advice you would give them for launching an ABM program?
Yeah, I would say, firstly, getting executive buy-in. I think that's the most important thing, because once you've got that and you've actually educated the executives on what ABM is and what it can bring to the business, then that still starts to filter down to the rest of the company, and everyone gets on the same page. So rather than, for example, someone like me who's a kind of little cog in a big wheel trying to educate people on ABM, go straight to the top, tell them why ABM is a good idea, tell them why it's going to bring value, and show them how it can potentially grow their business. And from there, it'll just be like fireworks and everyone will be on the same page.
Well, that's a great piece of advice to end on, Bex. Thank you so much for sharing your ABM journey with us today and for being so generous with your time. And I wish you every success there at Showpad with your ABM program.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Great to speak to you.
Thanks, Bex.